All right, we can get going. Hello everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Sammy Godlove. I am the Central Oregon Field Associate for Oregon Wild, based out of the Bend, Oregon office. And for those who aren't familiar with Oregon Wild, we work to protect and restore Oregon's wildlife, wildlands, and waters as an enduring legacy for future generations. You can learn more about what we do at our website, OregonWild.org. And today we are talking all about the Upper Deschutes River Basin, which is where our presenter, Hal, and myself are calling in from today. And I want to acknowledge that these lands and waters that we call the Upper Deschutes, Bend, Central Oregon, are the ancestral lands of the Warm Springs, Paiute, Wasco, Klamath, and other tribes that made their homes along the Deschutes River and traveled through the Deschutes River corridor. We are here today because this land was occupied and its traditional people were displaced by colonists and settlers. And as settlers and guests of this land, we recognize the diverse Native communities of this region today and offer our respect and gratitude for their stewardship of these lands throughout their generations. And I am very excited today to introduce you to our presenter, Hal Wershow. Hal is a professor of geology at Central Oregon Community College here in Bend. He teaches courses on geology, sustainability, climate research, and how spring-fed rivers in Central Oregon are responding to climate change. And today he is here to talk all about the Upper Deschutes River Basin. So just a couple quick housekeeping items, and then I'll let Hal take it away. First, thank you to all who purchased a raffle ticket this evening. We will be raffling off a copy of our Oregon Ancient Forest Field Guide, which I have a copy of right here, as well as an Oregon Wildway t-shirt. These raffle ticket purchases not only help us continue these Wednesday presentations, but also help make our work at Oregon Wild possible. And the winners of the raffle will be notified via email within the next couple of days, so be on the lookout for that. Also, a recording of this webcast will be sent out to everyone who registered and will also be posted on our website under the Wild blog. Lastly, we will have a few minutes for Q&A at the end, but please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation as they come up. We typically receive a rush of submissions close to the end, so getting them in early will help me organize and make sure that I can get to as many of them as possible. And you can submit questions using the Q&A function, which should be at the top of your screen, maybe the bottom of your screen. Oh, and one last thing, we have some very exciting webcasts coming up over the next few weeks, as it said in our poll. First, we have one on the recovery of the peregrine falcon on November 29th. And on December 13th, we will be joined by world-renowned author Terry Tempest Williams and illustrator Alan Crawford to talk about Alan's book, A Wild Promise, which is a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Act, which is coming up at the end of December. So what better way to celebrate this big anniversary than by learning about some of the amazing species that were saved from extinction because of this landmark law. And you can sign up for both of those webcasts now on our website. All right, that's all I have. Hal, you can take it away.
All righty. Thank you so much, Sammy, and thank you, Oregon Wild, for doing what you folks do. Let's talk about the Deschutes River. All right. So what are we going to talk about? We'll start off by helping you guys understand why geologists refer to the Deschutes as the peculiar river. We'll talk about the Upper Deschutes Basin, the geology, the climate, the hydrology, and then understanding a little bit about the difference between groundwater and surface water. After that, we'll move on to talk about some of the major tributaries of the Deschutes, particularly the Fall River, Tumalo Creek, and Whitechoose Creek. And we'll wrap up by talking about humans in the Deschutes. We'll talk a little bit more about the native history of humans on the Deschutes, the Euro-American history, and discuss how the modern Deschutes looks and how it's being managed. All right, let's jump into this. One thing I should mention, anywhere you see these underlined hyperlinks, these are all links that you guys can access. I will make sure that Sammy sends out, or maybe he already has, a link to these slides. These are all Google slides that are freely available to anyone. I've got notes in them that you can read, and you can follow these links and explore to your heart's content and learn a lot more. Anyways, let's talk about the Upper Deschutes Basin. So a basin is the same thing as a watershed. If you don't know what a basin or a watershed is, it's a area of land that you can see outlined in here. And any drop of water that falls within this defined area of land will eventually make its way down to a common exit point, which in this case is where the Deschutes meets the Columbia. So this is the Deschutes Basin. But we are talking about the Upper Deschutes Basin. So what is the Upper Deschutes Basin? That's basically everything from Lake Billy Chinook upstream. So that would be the Deschutes upstream from Lake Billy Chinook. That would be the Crooked River upstream from Lake Billy Chinook, although I will say we're not really going to talk about the Crooked. It has a completely different geologic history. And also the Metolius upstream from Lake Billy Chinook. To give you guys a better sense of what it means for a water droplet to move through a basin, I've got a super fun little thing here. So hopefully you're seeing my new screen now. It's an app called River Runner, which I highly recommend. It's super awesome. But basically what it does is help us visualize watersheds. So in this case, I told it to put a drop of water into Little Lava Lake. This is conventionally considered the beginning of the Deschutes River. It's going to roll through Crane Prairie Reservoir. It's going to then wind its way into Wickiup Reservoir, and then we're going to spin around and get all dizzy because this is what the Deschutes does. Now we're moving north. There's Lapine State Park. Notice how meandering it is. That's because this used to be a lake basin. Here's the Lava Butte lava flow. There's a great geology story there. Now we're entering the city of Bend, going past Bend. And the big story now is it becomes very canyonized, which is a word I just made up. But the Deschutes River is in a deep canyon as we go past Redmond. As we approach Crooked River Ranch, Cove Palisades State Park, and there is Lake Billy Chinook, and we'll pause right there. So that's just giving you a visual sense of what it's like to be a water molecule running along through the Deschutes. All right, let's go back to the slides. All right, so we need to talk about the geology of the Upper Deschutes Basin. Remember, basin, watershed, same thing. So this is a classic geology diagram. You can see it's focusing on Oregon because there's the Willamette Valley. Here's our Cascades. Bend would be somewhere around here. The first thing we should talk about are the Cascades, the big volcanoes that we know and love. Geologists call them the High Cascades, and they are caused by subduction. Perhaps you've heard this geologic story. This is the Juan de Fuca plate diving underneath North America. We call this process subduction. And the first thing to know is the Juan de Fuca plate does not melt. Nope, common misconception. Instead, it's going to lose water, it's going to dehydrate, and that water is going to be added to the mantle right above. That's going to cause the mantle to melt. The melted mantle is now magma, and it's going to rise up, 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 up through the crust and go boom! Think of Mount St. Helens, 1980. Big dramatic eruptions, also smaller eruptions too, but it's more fun to talk about the big dramatic ones. And they tend to be explosive. That's why I've chosen this icon to represent what I'm going to call the stereotypical high cascades, the ones that we tend to think of, South Sister, Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens. However, here in Central Oregon, it's actually a very different, more interesting story. And that's because we're at the border of the Basin and Range province. And there's an entirely different tectonic process happening here in the Basin and Range, and that is something called extension. Kind of like what it sounds. Here's your Earth, the crust. It's being pulled apart. It's extending. As it extends, there's a few things that happen. One, it causes less pressure on the mantle below, causing the mantle to melt, create magma. Two, it opens up the crust and makes it easier for that magma to rise to the surface. And when it does, we tend to get a different type of volcano. Instead of these big explosive stratovolcanoes, we tend to get a lot more effusive volcanoes with a different type of magma that are often shield volcanoes and cinder cones. So what I want you to take from these two icons, the classic subduction zone related cascade volcanoes that you know and love are fairly explosive. These basin and range extensional volcanoes are more effusive, meaning they put out lava flows. All right, subduction, extension, different styles of volcanoes. Let's see what that looks like here in Central Oregon. So this image is a LiDAR image. It's basically what the Earth would look like if we stripped away all the trees. This is a geologist's paradise. We can see all the cool stuff. Not very good for life on Earth, but I'm digressing. Let's see, to orient you, Sisters is over here. Here's Highway 242, Mackenzie Pass Highway. Comes along here to the D. Wright Observatory, coolest place in Oregon for my money. Here's Mount Washington, and now let's start talking about our volcanoes. So Mount Washington looks tall and pointy. It's a shield volcano. Shield volcanoes usually have very broad, gentle profiles. I'll show you a photo in a little bit. You can just barely see it right here with Mount Washington. This is the uneroded part. All these steep parts have just been severely eroded by glaciers over the last few ice ages. Really, Mount Washington is just a big, broad, fairly gentle shield volcano, just like the one immediately south, Belknap Crater. Big, gentle shield volcano, sending out lava flows in every direction that just kind of build it up like a pancake. Lava flow after lava flow, gentle profile. Black Crater's another one, also had some chunks taken out, some lava flows that flowed out. Then we've got lots of cinder cones. Little Belknap Crater is a cinder cone. 4-in-1 cone is 4 little cinder cones. Yapoa Crater is a cinder cone. Collier Cone is a cinder cone. The point I want to make here is that we have lots of shield volcanoes and cinder cones, which are, I'm not going to say entirely because of the extension, but that's what we expect to find when we have extensional volcanism as well. You've got to go all the way down to North Sister and Middle Sister to find more traditional stratovolcanoes. Okay, so let's summarize that. Geology of the Upper Deschutes Basin, we have subduction, we have extension, and that equals awesome volcanoes. I love these volcanoes. They're super cool. This is what they look like. This is the Belknap Crater right there. Big old shield volcano, gentle slopes, and just like fresh lava everywhere. And from a geologist's perspective, incredibly young. This is just a few thousand years old. To me, it looks like Hawaii, which is awesome. Anyways, I want to emphasize this point a few more times that we have really young volcanic rocks here in the Upper Deschutes Basin. So this is a geologic map of Oregon. Geologic maps are notoriously difficult to read. They are color-coded, and I'm going to walk you guys through this. So the left side of this map, centered around the Three Sisters, this whole area. These are late high cascade volcanics. What does that mean? It means young volcanic rocks. All right, young volcanic rocks there. Let's go to the east side of the Deschutes River, east of Bend. This area with all this yellow here, centered around what they're calling Paulina Mountain, Newberry Volcano, this area. What is that? That is also yellow. Believe it or not, it's a different color of yellow. Those are quaternary volcanics. You know what that means? Young volcanic rock. This one's got a really fun story. This is all stuff coming out of Newberry. So here's Newberry Volcano, and this shape outlined here in all these greens and grays, these are all the lava flows that have come out of Newberry Volcano in the last 400,000 years, and that is where this shape here is coming from. All right, lots of young volcanic rocks. Why this matters, why we're talking about this and to talk about rivers is because they're permeable. So permeability is the ability of water to go through something. Permeable rocks means when it rains, the water goes into the rocks. When it snows and the snow melts, the meltwater goes into the rocks. This is in contrast to what happens when, say, it rains on a parking lot and all the water stays on the top and pools at the surface. So basically, when we have permeable rocks, the water becomes groundwater. It goes underground. All right, young volcanic permeable infiltrates, becomes groundwater. Let's transition and talk about our climate because I keep on talking about water here. So the way I characterize our climate, despite the fact that people call it the high desert, I appreciate that Sammy referred to it as a semi-arid environment. We have fairly snowy, cold, wet winters. We have a melting spring, and then of course we have dry summers. I want to talk about that melting spring. So this graph on the left is from a snowtail site, the Three Creeks Meadows snowtail site. This is what it looks like in the summer when there's no snow on it, but basically it measures how much snow there is. The snow accumulates here. I won't go into the details. the numbers that it spits out are snow water equivalent. That is, if you took a foot of snow and melted it, how much water would you have? Maybe 1 or 2 inches. So that's what these numbers represent. Your x-axis is time starting October 1st, going through October 1st again, the end of September. That's our water year. The reason that water scientists start on October 1st is told in this SNOWTEL data. So the red is probably last year's data, and then the blue is the median over 1991 to 2020. The only point here is that they're fairly similar, and both of them start to accumulate, in this case, in November. So we start seeing snow accumulating on the landscape right about now. That snow increases, and peaks somewhere in late March to early April. Last year, we had a better snow year, later peak. That's what's going on there. Now that we're in spring, look what happens to our snowpack. It rapidly melts. By the time we get to mid-May, it's gone, at least at these moderate elevations, 5,690 feet. So let me show you what that looks like, our melting springs, the season. This is Tumalo Creek from last May, and pretty obvious, enormous quantities of water gushing down, melting snow everywhere. This is what I want us to think about when we're talking about the climate of the Upper Deschutes Basin. Enormous quantities of water being released during the spring. All right. Where does that water fall? So the whole high desert thing, that's coming from our cities, Madras, Bend, etc., where we are getting maybe 10 inches or 15 inches of rain a year. Sorry, precipitation. But if we go to the crest of the Cascades, those high Cascades, those young volcanic rocks, check this out. That black color, 2,030 millimeters, that translates to over 6.5 feet of precipitation. Far more than that in snow, but if you melt it, it'd be 6.5 feet of water. So enormous quantities of water are entering our landscape in the high Cascades. So how does that play out in terms of the rivers? So this is a map of Oregon. All the blue lines are our rivers and streams. And there's the Upper Deschutes Basin again, nicely outlined for us in black. Take a moment. I want you guys to turn your brains on. What's a little odd about the rivers in our region? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. So hopefully what's sticking out to you is how few there are. Now, if you look out here, there's a reason there's not a lot of rivers. There's no rain here. This is like legit desert. There's a very large amount of precipitation here, as I just said, and yet there's very few rivers. This doesn't make sense. What's going on? Well, sorry, back up. This is because our volcanic rocks are so permeable. The water's going into the ground instead of staying on the surface. This is why it becomes groundwater instead of surface water. So let's talk about surface water and groundwater. Surface water is pretty simple. It's your rivers, your lakes, your streams. It's anything you can see. If it's above ground and you can see it, it's surface water. This is the Deschutes River at Bull Bend Campground. Groundwater is trickier because you can't see it. Even here, this is the best we can do. This is a photograph along the Metolius River of groundwater emerging from the rock right there. Water's coming out of the rock and entering the Metolius River. The moment we see it, it's actually surface water. So we can't actually see groundwater, but this is an example of a spring. A spring is the point at which groundwater becomes surface water. The other ways that you've probably heard or interacted with groundwater would be aquifers, which refer to large volumes of water underground. They're all stuck in the rocks, in permeable rocks. It's not like a big lake underground. But when you drill a well and pull water out of your well, that well water is coming from the aquifer and it's all groundwater. So that's groundwater. It's below our feet. We can't see it. All right, cool. We got surface water. We got groundwater. The takeaway point here is that the hydrology of the Upper Deschutes Basin is groundwater dominated. Most of the water in our rivers came out of the ground, came out of springs like we see right here in this image. All right, groundwater dominated Upper Deschutes Basin. So this is unusual. Actually, it's very unusual. I want to show you what a normal river basin looks like, a surface water dominated river basin. For that, we'll go to the Tualatin River, west of Portland. So there's Portland. Here's the Tualatin River. And we're going to go to a gauging station. This is where geologists measure how much water is flowing past in the river at that moment. So it's measured in cubic feet per second. Sometimes that's called discharge. So that's what our y-axis is showing, is cubic feet per second, how much water is flowing past the gauge at any moment. The x-axis is time. Again, we're starting October 1st, the beginning of the water year, going through the end of September. What I want you to notice here is how spiky this hydrograph is. So if we look at the green, that's last year's water. If we look at November of 2021, I guess that would be, you can see individual storms. So the Tualatin was running maybe, I don't know, 200 cubic feet per second, moved up a little bit over the first week or two. Then all of a sudden, probably within a day, went from maybe 300 cubic feet per second to 1,200 cubic feet per second. The river quadrupled, probably in as little as a day. That is classic surface water dominated watershed behavior. Geologists call it flashy, rapidly rises, rapidly drops. And there's the drop, shoots right back down to where it was within a week or so. You can see that in the current water year. You can see that in the averages, although that's a little more muted. And then the other way we see that is the summer flows are really low. So summer, it doesn't rain in Oregon, period. And this is what it looks like for rivers that rely on surface water. If it stops raining, the river dries up to almost nothing. We're probably less than 100 cubic feet per second right there for months on end. So another way of thinking about these surface water dominated basins is that they're weather dominated. Dominated is not quite the word I'm looking for. They're heavily influenced by the weather of that day or that week or that month. Groundwater dominated basins are much more buffered from the weather. All right, so let's talk about our peculiar hydrology. So this is what the Deschutes River would look like. Take a moment, digest this. Don't worry so much about this stuff. Just look at the blue line. That's the average flow. And what you might notice is that our lowest flows are about 500 cubic feet per second, and those are happening in the late winter to early spring, February, March, April. Then we see a very gradual ramp up, and by late summer, August, September, we hit our maximum flows, right around 1,000 cubic feet per second. So think about that. We went from 500 to 1,000, we doubled in like 6 months. The Tualatin, we quadrupled in a day. Tremendously different behavior. This is what a groundwater dominated basin looks like. Very gradual changes in the flow in the river. We don't see individual weather events like a storm showing up here. Geologists noted this when they first came upon the scene. This is a quote. "The flow of the river is more remarkably uniform than that of any other river in the United States comparable with it in size. And its economic value is almost incalculable." Let's focus on that for a minute. Economic value. Surface water dominated watersheds, rivers in them, flood. Floods are expensive. Floods destroy stuff. Having a river that doesn't flood is amazing in terms of our ability to build houses right next to it and not worry about them getting taken out by floods. If you've ever been to Bend, people build houses right next to the river because of this. All right, let's enjoy some nice early 1900s science talk. Finish off the quote. "Ocular evidence of this uniformity of flow is presented by the low grass-grown banks between which the river flows." Isn't that nice? So that was F. Henshaw of the USGS in 1914, noting how peculiar the Deschutes River is. So let's wrap this up and put it together about our peculiar river. Our geology, highly permeable young volcanic rocks. Our climate, wet, snowy winters, rapidly melting spring snowpack. The hydrology, the Upper Deschutes is a groundwater-dominated basin with very gentle changes in the hydrographs and the behavior of our rivers. All right, that's the Upper Deschutes. Let's talk about the other rivers in the Upper Deschutes Basin. Let's talk about the Fall River. So let's orient first with this map in the top right. There's the gauging station that we're going to be reading the data from. This is the basin, the kind of mini basin that feeds it. And here's the Deschutes River, and you can see the two link up right there. So again, if we're looking at our hydrograph, the x-axis is time, starting October 1st, ending the end of September. The reason we've got 30-year-old data is because this gauging station was decommissioned in 1991. So that's why we're going back 30 years here. And our y-axis is, again, discharge in cubic feet per second. So I actually have a question for you guys, and Sammy's going to help me out here by running a poll. What I want you all to figure out is the Fall River Basin surface water dominated or groundwater dominated? Let's see how much we've learned here. Sammy, if you can bust out. Yeah, there's the poll. Cool. So surface water, groundwater, other. Take a moment. Think about that one. I'll take a sip of water and catch my breath. All right, Sammy, can we see what we chose? All right, well done. 94% of y'all said groundwater dominated. Very impressive. Good. You guys got it. It's not varying a lot. This is what a groundwater dominated system looks like. The Fall River is the classic groundwater fed stream in Oregon. My favorite way of seeing that, if you've ever floated the Deschutes in this section, the moment that the Fall River joins the Deschutes, you can see this crystal clear line of water winding into the Deschutes, which is fairly murky. We'll talk about that later. But you can actually follow that for like 100 yards before it thoroughly mixes. So that's another fun fact about our groundwater dominated streams. They carry very little sediment. They're very clear. Beautiful, right? Cool. Awesome. Let's move on to the next one. This is Deschutes Creek. We are upstream of Sisters, Oregon right here. Now we have 2 years of data, and this is monthly averages. But again, our y-axis is discharge. And I have the same question for you guys, and we're going to run the same poll. Is this a surface water dominated system, or is it a groundwater dominated system? All right, Sammy, can we see the results? All right, well done, folks. 90% of y'all said surface water dominated. Good. You're seeing the flashy hydrograph. I made it a little bit harder because these are monthly averages, so it doesn't look quite as flashy. But still, we're seeing a huge peak in the late spring, early summer. That's our snow melt. And we see the same thing the next year, slightly different timing because different years are different. And then we see really low flows during the winter when everything's frozen. What you might be asking yourself is, well, wait a minute, we're still in the high Cascades, like the Three Sisters are right here. This is all young volcanic rock. What's going on? You're right, it is young volcanic permeable rock. However, it's been covered in enormous quantities of glacial till. That is the name for the sediment that glaciers leave behind. And much of this watershed was run over by glaciers during the last ice age. Glacial till has a lot of clay in it. Clay is incredibly impermeable. So glacial till is basically like a tarp on top of our landscape here that is preventing the water from infiltrating, keeping it on the top, and creating a more surface water dominated system. Cool. Deschutes Creek, similar geology, but just one important difference, and that makes all the difference in how the river behaves. All right, next one, Tumalo Creek. Here's Bend. Here's Tumalo Creek. Here's our gauging station. We've got a small little watershed going up towards Broken Top Volcano. Again, our x-axis is time, October 1st to November. Well, we're going a little bit later, whatever. Our y-axis, again, is cubic feet per second discharge. And you guys know the game at this point. Surface water or groundwater? All right, Sammy, may we see the results? All right, this one's a little more mixed. We had 75% say ground surface water, 10% groundwater, 16% other. And I would say we kind of nailed it. It's obviously got some surface water characteristics, like that right there. That's probably a rain on snow event. Like imagine if there was a warm, wet storm that came in right now, it would melt a lot of snow. That's probably that guy right there. And we see our spring snow melt and some rapid fluctuations. That all looks like surface water. But there's some other things going on here which make it clear that this is a little more complicated. We've got a pretty high sustained flow in the summer, and that's implying that there's something else other than rainwater feeding it. If you've ever gone hiking in this area, this is the City of Bend's water supply. There are springs everywhere, like just insane amounts of springs. This is more or less where I took that photograph that I took earlier. So all those springs keep flowing during the dry summer. And I think what's going on here in the winter is everything's freezing up, which is why we're getting our lowest flows in the late winter. All right, so I would go with surface water here, but it's more complicated. There's definitely a groundwater component as well. All right, last one, the Deschutes River itself. So where are we? We're right below Wikiup Reservoir. Here's Bend, here's Wikiup Reservoir. Here's our hydrograph. You guys should be pretty familiar with this. The blue is the current year, the green is the last year, the red is an average year. One more time, Sammy, please, the poll. Thank you. So take a look, folks. All right, let's see what people are thinking. Yeah, good. Excellent. We're all over the place. 28% surface water, 44% groundwater, 27% other. This definitely ain't surface water. I mean, look at that. It's just flatline for months and months and months. It definitely ain't groundwater. Look at that. In a matter of a day or two, we go from like 100 CFS to 400 CFS. So it's going to have to be other. And in this case, it's human management. So this is how we manage the Deschutes River. We hold the water back in the winter. It gets stored in Wikiup Reservoir. And then we release it during the summer. We're going to go deeper into that, but let's just start there. We hold the water back in the winter. We release it during the summer. So these rapid step-ups are human-controlled releases of the water. As a reminder, to reconnect to our peculiar hydrology, this is what it would look like. And when I say would look like, because we don't actually have this data, this is a model, because we don't know right now, because we're managing it. Anyways, the point I want to make here is contrasting what our typically groundwater dominated Deschutes should look like with what it actually looks like in terms of its behavior. All right, well, if we're talking about human management, maybe we should talk about humans and the Deschutes. And we will start with talking about the native history here. So this photograph in the top right is of native folks fishing at Celilo Falls. If you don't know the story of Celilo Falls, I encourage you to learn more. It's up on the Columbia. Man, I could go off on that one. I'll restrain myself. I want to talk about the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Lots of other folks have lived here over the times, but I want to focus on these ones because I know a little bit more about them because I read the website of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, which I encourage you to learn more about. So let's start with the Wasco. The Wasco band spoke a Chinook language. They fished along the Columbia. They seasonally traveled upriver to gather, hunt, and fish, so essentially fisher folk. The Warm Springs bands spoke Sahaptin. They lived in Central Oregon, and they would move between winter and summer villages, focusing on game, roots, and berries, and of course salmon when that was available. In contrast, the Paiute bands, who spoke a Shoshonean language, actually lived fairly far away in southeastern Oregon on the high plains. They were very different culturally from the Columbia River tribes. They were more nomadic. They tended to travel far and wide in search of game. And that actually led to a number of skirmishes and less frequent commerce. The river itself was named Deschutes, D-E-S space C-H-U-T-E-S, by French fur trappers. They were around Celilo Falls, which is near where the confluence of the Deschutes and the Columbia is. They saw the whitewater and they said, it is of the chutes, of the Cascades. So that's where our name came from. And then the other thing to know here, in 1855, the Treaty of Warm Springs was signed, in which the tribes of Warm Springs ceded 10 million acres. That's 1/6 of the entire state of Oregon to the United States government in exchange for a small reservation, but crucially, I'm going to quote, the rights to harvest fish, game, and other foods off the reservation in their usual and accustomed places. So that line became the key part of what is known as the Bolt decision, which I believe was the early 1970s, which was the culmination of the fish wars, which is basically the Pacific Northwest version of the civil rights movement. If those are all new to you, I encourage you to learn more. It's a fascinating story and resulted in Native folks regaining much of their sovereignty and their ability to harvest fish and game in their usual and accustomed places. So pretty cool story there. I encourage you to learn more. Let's talk about the Euro-American history of this region. So let's start off with the image in the bottom left. This is an irrigation canal. When I first moved here, I saw canals everywhere, and I just totally didn't even get that they were canals. I had no idea what they were, but they ran dry every winter, so I was confused. The irrigation canals are really what made Central Oregon Central Oregon. They were built all over the place so that people could practice traditional Euro-American style agriculture, growing fields of alfalfa, things like that. To do that, they formed irrigation districts in the early 1900s. So that's what this map is showing us. I'll zoom in on it. So this green one is the Central Oregon Irrigation District. The brown one is the North Unit Irrigation District. In 1909, this was all formalized in the Oregon Water Code. By 1918, the Central Oregon Irrigation District had been founded. That meant that it had senior water rights. Basically, it was first in line for whatever water was available. By 1949, Wickiup Reservoir was built, and this really began the era of human management of the river, basically because there wasn't enough water to do all the irrigating that people wanted to do. Excuse me. The folks in the North Unit Irrigation District didn't have enough water to irrigate with because it was all being used by folks with senior water rights. So they built Wickiup so that we could hold water back in the winter and then release it in the summer when the irrigators needed it. Fun fact, 1987, the Deschutes River gains its own water rights, which are decidedly junior. All right, let's move on here. Humans in the Upper Deschutes Basin, who's using the water and how? So I think this graph to me is worth $1 million. It really helps us understand our region. So one, it helps us understand this scene down here in the bottom left, this amazing, beautiful image of these lush fields of high-valued commodity crops that have really been the foundation of our economy for a long time here, with the beautiful sisters in the background. 86% of the water rights in Central Oregon belong to agriculture and are used for irrigation. The Deschutes River itself, instream, has 12% of the water rights. 2% go to municipal. That means cities. The city of Bend, city of Redmond, it's Madras, Prineville, Lapine, you get it, 2%. I think there's a common misconception that as our region is booming, which it is, that the cities are using up all the water, and that's not true. We're using about 2% of it. This is an example of how we are using it. This is near the city of Bend's water supply, and water is being diverted into these pipes, which will eventually come out of my tap water when I turn on the tap. All right. We're getting close to the end, folks. Hang with me a little bit more. The Deschutes irrigation ditch, question mark. So basically, the point I want to make here is that we are managing the Deschutes for irrigation, and we have been since at least 1949, if not before then. What the consequence of that for the hydrograph is, follow this, this is our natural flow, this is what it would be. This is more like what it is. Very low flows in the winter. Basically, think of this gap right here. That's Wickiup Reservoir. That's all the water being held back. And then in the summer, we have very high flows, over 1,400 cubic feet per second, far higher than would have normally been experienced. That's that extra water being released. Great for irrigation. However, as you may have heard, that creates some other challenges and unintended side effects. That's a whole nother talk. The problems with having this regulated flow of low winter flows and high summer flows. I want to focus on one aspect, and that is sticking to the geology. So what are the geologic consequences? Well, the image in the top left shows what the winter looks like. You can see that the river's normally somewhere up here, maybe even all the way up here. That's why the person built a dock here so that they could access the river. Now it's way down here, and all this sediment is exposed. It's exposed to weathering and erosion. And then in the summer, when the flows rise again, that fast water rips that sediment away, turns the Deschutes a muddy, murky, the Deschutes River carries the sediment, and then it runs into town, Bend, into a place called Muir Pond, which is rapidly becoming a mud flat. It'll be a very expensive mud flat for us to dredge. But what I want y'all to see here is that the reason we have all this sediment collecting here in Muir Pond is because of this altered flow regime, the low winter flows and the high summer flows. The other half of the story, by the way, is the Bend Hydro Dam. That's what's stopping the water and allowing the sediment to be dropped here. But the sediment itself is coming from upstream. All right, so that is one geologic consequence. It's worth noting, again, the economic importance of that irrigating water has been incredibly beneficial to many people in Central Oregon. I don't like ending things on those negative notes. I prefer hope and beauty. This is the city of Bend's drinking water supply. This is Prowell Springs. It is beautiful. It is lush. It is wonderful. It is abundant. This is why this is a good place to live in the 21st century as our climate gets hotter and drier. I think that's all I have to say there. I love this place. Yeah, so thank you all very much. If you want to learn more, I'm going to throw a few opportunities at you. You can take classes at Central Oregon Community College. The cool thing about community college is anyone can take classes there. You don't have to be a traditional student. Many of my students, including some of the ones in this photograph that I took, are non-traditional students who just love learning. So that's a thing that you can do spring term, learn about our rivers, lakes, and springs, go to places like this. You can learn about it via videos, recordings from the Deschutes River Conservancy's Raise the Deschutes seminar. Reminder, you guys all have access to these links. Or you can learn about it from the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council, who is partnering with COCC's Community Education Branch and giving a series on the Metolius and Sisters in February and the Upper Deschutes in Bend in April. These are all great ways to learn more. And I think I'm done talking. Thank you all very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation, Hal. Before we get into Q&A, I've seen we have quite a few good questions. So hopefully we can get to a bit of them. But before we get to that, I want to take a few minutes to talk to you all about a current opportunity, really a historic opportunity we are working on right now to protect many of the streams in the Upper Deschutes Basin that Hal was talking about, as well as many other streams all across the state. So hang on while I share my screen. Okay, so this historic opportunity, as you can see from the title, is the River Democracy Act. And so first introduced in 2021 by Senator Ron Wyden, the River Democracy Act would add over 3,200 miles of rivers and streams across Oregon to the National Wild and Scenic River System. And if you're looking at the map, all of these bright green worm-looking lines, these are all streams that would be included in the bill and would be new wild and scenic rivers. So in addition to protecting the streams themselves, the RDA would also designate and protect a half-mile buffer on either side of each stream. And in total, this amounts to about 2 million acres of public lands all across Oregon that would be protected in this bill. So on this map, the dark blue lines are rivers that are already wild and scenic. And just south of Bend, right here, is the Upper Deschutes River, which is designated as wild and scenic. And this general area here is the Upper Deschutes River Basin. So while the river itself is wild and scenic, a lot of these tributaries, actually all of its tributaries are not. And here is a little closer view that shows the Upper Deschutes River Basin from its headwaters at Little Lava Lake all the way down past Bend. So the blue lines, again, are the RDA streams. The purple are the designated wild and scenic rivers. So much of the Deschutes itself, the Upper Deschutes, the Lower Deschutes too, is already designated as wild and scenic. But again, most of its tributaries are not. And the tributaries included in the RDA include many of the streams that Hal was talking about, including the Upper Deschutes itself, actually, Fall River, Paulina Creek, the Little Deschutes River, which eventually flows into the Deschutes, Tumalo Creek, and you can't see it on the map, but Lower Waichus Creek, Upper Waichus Creek is wild and scenic, Lower Waichus Creek is included as well. And these are all key tributaries that are important sources of cold water, water quality, and quantity, and habitat for fish and wildlife habitat. And here's some photos of those tributaries over here. So what is wild and scenic designation and how does it protect rivers? Passed in 1968, the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is the strongest form of river protection we have. It's our strongest river conservation tool. This text on the slide here is pulled directly from the statutory language of the Act. So wild and scenic rivers are designated for one or more outstandingly remarkable values, which we call ORVs. And as the text in this slide states, these values can include scenic, recreational, geologic, fish and wildlife, historic, cultural, and other values. And basically, any activity that would degrade one or more of these values is prohibited if the river is designated as wild and scenic. And while some of our most iconic rivers in Oregon, such as the Rogue River, pictured here, are designated as wild and scenic, it's only actually 2% of Oregon's almost 111,000 river miles that are actually designated as wild and scenic right now. So these are just some of the rivers that would be given wild and scenic protections under the RDA. From these photos, you can see these streams all have tremendous scenic and recreational values. The Tumalo Creek watershed, as Hal was discussing, in addition to being extremely scenic and beautiful, is also the primary source of drinking water for the city of Bend. And drinking water is one value that would be protected by this legislation. So we actually just released a report last week highlighting the potential positive impact of the River Democracy Act on drinking water across Oregon. And we found that 71% of Oregonians get drinking water from surface water sources, which are rivers, streams, and lakes. And many of these sources do not currently have any real protections. And we also found that over 1.3 million Oregonians get drinking water from sources that would receive increased protections from the RDA. This includes communities such as Bend, Eugene, Medford, much of Clackamas County, and many others. And this map on the right shows the drinking watersheds across Oregon, which is shaded in blue, as well as all the RDA streams again, which are the light blue lines. So 103,000 people in Bend, including myself, get drinking water from the Tumalo Creek watershed, and specifically from Bridge Creek, which you can see here. And the RDA would provide increased protections here to water quality for drinking water, for fish and wildlife habitat, recreation, and many other values, whatever values the creek is designated for. Okay, and to end, oh wait, here we go. I just want to play this very inspiring video of Senator Wyden talking about how the RDA came to be. One disclaimer, he says the RDA includes 4,700 miles of streams, but that is for the original version of the bill. The newest version, which came out after this video was made, includes 3,200 miles. Let me see if this will play.
Hey, Sammy, this is silent. I'm not sure if that's intentional.
Uh-oh, no sound?
Yeah, maybe go back to, in your Zoom options, you can share video sound. That might be what you need to do.
Share sound, yeah. All right, let's try this one more time.
All good.
That fellow's pretty young. Sign says here, the wild and scenic rivers, capital of the world. This embodies all the dreams that we had back then. But I always wanted to pick up on this incredible legacy. With this bill, we're fulfilling that vision. going to call it the River Democracy Act, because the recommendations for the future of the wild and scenic river system in Oregon didn't come from Washington, D.C. It came from Oregonians in every nook and cranny of our state. We had 15,000 nominations, and it has produced a bill that is going to ensure that we are the league leaders in terms of wild and scenic river protection. The addition is 4,684 miles of river corridors, 800 segments of Oregon rivers. When we pass this bill, we will indisputably be number one in the country in terms of protection for rivers. It's almost, in our DNA. You think about the rogue in the beginning of the wild and scenic river system in the 1960s, and it's part of what we want to leave to our kids and our grandkids. Now, we also know that it's become an extraordinary economic engine. Recreation supports well over 200,000 jobs statewide. It generates more than $15 billion. After the infernos of 2020, we thought it was particularly important to make sure that we involved these federal land managers, then put in place a fire reduction plan. Normally, the first thing somebody says is, well, you can have river protection or you can deal with public safety like fires. And we said, we'll write a bill that gives you a chance to have both. The tribal co-management piece is what it sounds like, is we wanted to give a broad swath for empowering the tribes for practices they're comfortable with. It is respectful of tribal rights. It does apply to rivers that do not directly affect private property. We felt very strongly about protecting private property rights. It's about protecting our treasures, clean drinking water. It's about recreation. And it's about making sure that on our watch, on our special time on Earth, we really did something for our kids and our grandkids. And Oregon is really showing the way. We are going to be the lodestar for a very fresh approach in terms of protecting our treasures. I've never felt more fulfilled than with this River Democracy Act.
Okay, yeah, we love our rivers over here at Oregon Wild. But you can visit our website to learn more about the River Democracy Act, the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and how you can help get this historic legislation passed. So Wild and Scenic River designation takes an act of Congress, which means it's really up to you, to all of us, to tell our congressional members that we want to see these rivers protected. And you can do that by writing, emailing, calling, tweeting at Senators Wyden and Merkley, or your local representative, to tell them that you support the River Democracy Act and want to see it passed. And we made it really easy to do that. You can do it right now. You can scan this QR code and send a pre-written message to our senators, encouraging them to get this bill passed. And we'll send out all of these links in a follow-up email, as well as some of Hal's links that he included in his slides. And lastly, if you're really passionate about protecting rivers, or you just want to learn more, please feel free to email me. There really is no shortage of ways to take action to protect our amazing rivers here in Oregon. And with that, I think we'll go to Q&A. All right, we got quite a few questions.
All right.
Let's see. First one, how does climate change affect the heavy spring runoff to the best we can predict?
Good question. I think what I'll say there is everywhere, it's going to affect everywhere. And usually in a surface water dominated basin, climate change means an earlier spring runoff, and that means less water available in the summer. And that's absolutely what's happening on the west side, the Willamette Basin. Because we've got a groundwater dominated basin, we actually experience that less dramatically. We're kind of buffered against that because that spring snowmelt, much of it goes into the rocks first, which slow it down instead of immediately going into the rivers. So I would say there is some, how do I put it? It's not great having the snow melt earlier, but we have a buffer here that most parts of the world don't have.
And this one, I'm sure it's from a skier. How does El Nino affect the snowpack?
And the rule of thumb or the shortcut is La Nina years are really good for us. They're wetter and colder, and El Nino years tend to be warmer and drier. So not great.
And we got quite a few questions about the website that you showed at the beginning, showing the drop of water and following it down a watershed. Was that River Runner?
Yeah, that was
okay.
River Runner.
Yeah, so everyone, River Runner is the website for that. Let's see. Okay, this is not quite a geology question, but we'll see. I might be able to help a little bit. How important are beavers to this habitat? And if they are, what are we doing to reintroduce them?
The shirt that I'm wearing as my undershirt right now is Think Wild Oregon Beavers shirt. Beavers are amazing, and they're actually a really important tool from a geologist perspective because they slow water down. Especially in surface water dominated systems like the Crooked River watershed, where water rapidly moves through when it rains or snow melts, beaver dams slow that water down. So they have a similar function to what we see in our watershed with the groundwater dominated signal, where it slows the water down and leaves more water available for later in the year, like the summer. So beavers are a huge win for water resources basically everywhere. And there's lots of people who are doing some really cool beaver work in Central Oregon. So yeah, beavers are great.
Yeah, I'll just add, yeah, Think Wild is a great local organization working on a lot of beaver habitat stuff. ONDA is another one working to restore beaver habitat across Central and Eastern Oregon. We're working, I'm not on the wildlife team, so I hope I don't butcher this, but we're working on some of the more advocacy legislative stuff to try and help beavers. Currently beavers are classified as predators under state law, which means basically it's a lot easier to trap and hunt them, and there's not a whole lot of regulation stopping that. So we're, along with Think Wild and many other organizations, trying to get that changed so they're no longer classified as predators and they have much more protections. Let's see. Okay, I don't know if you have this off the top of your head, Hal, but do you know how much water is used by golf courses and similar recreational facilities by percentage? I'm assuming for the Upper Deschutes.
Yeah, it's a hard one to figure because so think of that pie I showed you, the 86-212 pie. Golf courses are in two parts of that. So if you're in a more rural area, a golf course might have water rights and it's part of the big agriculture pie. But then a golf course in the middle of the city of Bend is using water from the city of Bend's supply. So I would say I'm not sure anyone knows the answer to that. Yeah.
All right, we'll do one last question. This is a very timely one, if anyone has read the bulletin today. So in today's bulletin, there was an article regarding the Metolius. And while I know you're not talking about it, do you have any thoughts about why the groundwater in the Metolius is lower over the last few years? are other Deschutes River, I'm assuming other tributaries to the Deschutes, showing similar trends?
Yeah, so that gets back to the drought. There's a number of things which influence groundwater levels, and what scientific studies in this region have shown is the biggest contributor to declining groundwater levels and declining levels in the Fall River and the Metolius River is decades of drought. We've just had below average precipitation for basically since the year 2000. We've been in a pretty historic drought. The last 3 years have been really bad, but we've been in a 20+ year long drought. That's the simplest answer to that question.
Great. And I want to thank Linda and Mark, because they corrected me, so I did butcher it. So beavers, as of 2023, the last state legislative session, beavers are no longer classified as predators.
Woohoo!
So good job, state legislature. They did something good. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much, Hal, for this presentation. That was awesome. Again, everyone, go to our website. We have a few cool webcasts coming up. You can sign up for them there. And otherwise, we hope to see you at a future Oregon Wild webcast or an in-person event. All right. Take care, everyone.
Awesome, Sammy. That was fun.
Thanks a lot, Hal. That was fun.
Later.
Cool. Have a good one.